Everyone, welcome to another episode of Chai Talk with Wajatli for the Left Hook Substack, where I'm joined by Mehdi Hasan, who is the founder of Zeteo. And Mehdi is famous this week, perhaps for all the right and wrong reasons. If you are a masochist like me, you saw his 90-minute Jubilee interview slash debate with, I don't think that we can even call them conservatives anymore, Mehdi. I think it's fine to say fascists. And I think I could share this. A couple of weeks ago when you did this, I got a call from you. And for the first time in a long time, you sounded, I want to say shook up, but you were just like a bit flabbergasted. You're like, you have no idea what I just endured and went through. And then you gave me some tidbits. I'm like, no. And you're like, yes. And it was as bad as you described, Mehdi. And so the framing of today's conversation is, should we engage with fascists? And I'm saying this because I believe, and I think you might agree with me, that the modern GOP, the modern MAGA movement, the modern right wing, this is who they are. They are fascists. That was not outliers. For those who haven't seen the 90-minute debate, there were folks who openly said that they were fascists and aligned themselves with Nazis. And there wasn't just one or two people who clapped. It was a whole bunch of folks, Mehdi. So I give it to you first and foremost. Why agree to go debate fascists? Number one.
So just to be clear, and Waj, thanks for having me, I did not agree to go and debate fascists. I agreed to go and debate Trump supporters. Now, for some people, that might be a distinction without a difference. But I genuinely believed I was going to debate a bunch of far-right folks who were going to defend Trump and say how great Trump is and defend his tax policies and his pardons and his attack on free speech. I didn't expect to have people saying we want General Franco to run the United States. We want autocracy. I'm a fascist, as that guy Connor giggled and laughed and said. Or people talking about white genocide or great replacement, all the far-right fascist hits. No, I didn't expect that. And maybe I was naive not to expect that. Maybe I should have realized when I was told I'm going to be debating 20 far-right conservatives. I did wonder what kind of people self-identify as far-right proudly. Well, these people do. And to go back to your point, look, there's been a lot of criticism of me for doing the show, and I totally understand it and acknowledge it and get why people think we shouldn't be platforming these people. But two things. Number one, in my defense, I didn't know they were fascists. If they'd told me I was sitting down with self-styled fascists, I wouldn't have done it. Let's just be clear about that. But number two, there is a value to exposing these people and showing people that this is what exists in our country. Waj, you and I have been talking about this for 10 years now, since I moved here, since before Trump was elected, that liberals, centrists, a lot of people in this country, establishment folks, just are not willing to acknowledge what is going on in this country, the shift to the far right, the moving of that Overton window, the mainstreaming of fascism and white supremacy and great replacement folks. There's a lot of denialism. You remember the first term of Trump when New York Times sent reporters to diners to talk to Trump voters about being left behind and free trade and factories shutting down. Is it economic anxiety or is it racial resentment? I think the Jubilee debate shut that one down once and for all. It's very clearly racial resentment. These folks did not want to talk about anything except immigration and race. I had a bunch of claims. You can watch the video. I came to talk about crime. I came to talk about the Constitution and civil liberties. I came to talk about Gaza. They weren't interested in any topic except immigration and race. They brought everything back to immigration and race. The second or third guy who sat down with me, the guy who was like a Hulk in waiting, I'd have this thing where I have to stay calm or otherwise I'll lose it. It was like, okay,
yeah,
Bruce
I
Banner.
thought he was going to punch you or punch himself in the face.
Yeah, a kind of wannabe bargain basement Bruce Banner. He opened with like, "Where are you from? Where are your parents from?" I'm like, what has that got to do with the claim about crime? It has everything to do with it because that is all they care about. Who is a real American? He, by the way, identified himself as a Native American because his families came as settlers apparently in the 1500s, which was a comical but scary moment.
It was, I don't blame you because Sam Cedar, a couple other folks have already done this. And,
but I respect did it. Like Sam, a lot of right-wingers have done it, what? A lot of right-wingers did it, right? A lot of right-wingers made it famous. Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens. And I thought, look, why doesn't a progressive enter this den? Maybe it was a mistake in hindsight. Somebody asked me earlier, I did an interview before this, Waj. They said, do you regret doing it? I said, I'm not sure yet. Like, ask me in a couple of weeks. I'm still working out the pros and cons of doing this because there are pros and cons to doing it. I acknowledge both sides of this argument. It is a tricky line we walk between exposing fascism, challenging fascism, but also not amplifying fascism or mainstreaming fascism. And Jubilee. You're walking a tightrope with that. But look, I will say one thing. Somebody on Twitter made this very good point about the asymmetry of our politics that is exposed by the Jubilee format.
Yeah.
Because Jordan Peterson goes on and debates 20 atheists, and there are a bunch of liberal, smart college kids who address him in good faith. I go on and I get a bunch of Nazis. I mean, that tells you about the divide. It's not both sides are extreme. It's that the far right has gone far right and taken over the Republican Party. To go back to your point, to paraphrase good old Max Boot at the Washington Post, I don't normally quote neocons, but the Republican Party used to be a mainstream conservative party with a white supremacist fringe. It is now a white supremacist party with a mainstream Republican.
And this is why I think the debate or the spectacle was very instructive. No, it's your internet's a bit freaky.
Sorry,
and
I'm on vacation out of town, as you can tell from my surroundings. So trying my best with the Wi-Fi.
But it was good. It was good because it froze you in the most awkward way, which was good for our amusement. But now you're back. But I think the reason why it was instructive, because number one, I think it's important for people to know that you probably can't say this, so I'll say it on your behalf. Jubilee knew what it was doing. You know, we've done this enough times where the producers know who they're choosing. If one or two Nazis slip, it happens. That wasn't just one or two fascists or Nazis, Mehdi. Like, you know, judging by what you said, the content, the overt racism directed towards you for 90 minutes, right? First of all, bravo to you for not, throwing up, being upset. And literally people said, you're not American, go back. I don't want you in my country. People applauded that. So number one, Jubilee, I believe, was very deliberate in inviting these right-wingers to provoke this type of sentiment because they knew it would go viral. Number two, good on you for sticking around for 90 minutes or maybe 2 hours for the whole taping. Most people wouldn't. But I think ultimately why this is instructive, and I think why I'm glad you did it, and I'm glad you were the person chosen to do this by fate, because most of us wouldn't last or be as effective, is it reveals who they are. There are no more dog whistles, Mehdi. You cannot even bend this with economic anxiety. All the, if you will, the taboo game that we played with Donald Trump. Oh, he has a racial flare-up. Oh, he has a racial trip-up. Remember that for the past 10 years? We've kept receipts.
Yeah.
This is who they are.
Yeah.
This is the face of the modern GOP and the right-wing movement. They are no longer outliers. And I remember a couple of years ago, I said by 2025, white supremacist talking points would be mainstream, and people laughed at me because you and I are not normies. We're masochists. We unfortunately follow the right wing. We can trace the right-wing talking points, the conspiracy theories. And in that debate, you were able to pick up on, and you mentioned it, the replacement theory. So can you just tell people real quick, because I think it's important for people to realize that it was immigration. You mentioned before, I just want to really stress that. The thing they kept going on when you talked about the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, free speech, Gaza, they couldn't stand the fact that a brown man, a person whose parents were from India, was in America talking to them and outclassing them.
Yes. There was a funny moment where they said, why do you care about the Constitution? Like, why do you care? We don't care. Why do you care? It was like, because I'm an American. I'm a naturalized American, and we take an oath to the Constitution. And there was a funny moment where one of them said, oh, we shouldn't have birthright citizenship. And I said, well, how would people become citizens then? Well, they'd all take a test in high school. And I said, the immigrant kids would beat the white native kids. And they went nuts when I said that, but we all know it's true. But, that's the great irony that I said to them at one point. I said, you keep saying I'm not an American. I'm the only American here. I'm the only one standing up to American values. I'm the only one defending the Constitution. I'm the only one saying free speech is important. So they are this blood and soil nationalist crew who want America to be some kind of fantasy, white fantasy. To go back to your point about great replacement theory, like this was once a fringe neo-Nazi theory. Let's be very clear. Neo-Nazi theory, conspiracy, which says that Jews are bringing in Muslims and brown and black folks to replace white Christians and take over America. It's a very ambitious racist conspiracy theory, which pulls in Jews, Muslims, black folks, immigrants, all into one great channeling theory. A lot of it comes from a French author who Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon have read. And again, it was on the neo-Nazi fringe 8-9 years ago. Even 5-6 years ago. It is now mainstream. Multiple Republican politicians, including Elise Stefanik, pushed the great replacement theory, even though there was a great replacement shooter in her state in Buffalo, in that black supermarket, if people remember. And yet, you and I are masochists who know this stuff. So when I'm sitting with these people, they're like, oh, I'm being replaced. I'm like, okay, you're a great replacement guy. The other guy's like, my people are being genocided. Okay, you're a white genocide guy, like Elon Musk. You can see them coming. And that's what's so worrying about these folks. Somebody asked me earlier in another interview, like, was this like the Ku Klux Klan? These people in many ways are worse than the Ku Klux Klan. Yeah, okay, look, I'm not accusing them of committing crimes or killing people, not yet. They're not burning crosses in hoods, but in many ways they're dangerous because they are the person next door. They are your coworker. They are your fellow college student. They are the person you bump into in the street. In a sense, they are amongst us, and they're online. They're very online. They're controlling a lot of the online discourse, a lot of the social media discourse. Some of these folks, the guy in the baseball cap who told me to get out, is loving it on Twitter. He's picking up new followers. He's pitching this as a win. So in many ways, they're very dangerous in that they're very online. They're very savvy when it comes to all of these conspiracy theories and memes and talking points, and they know how to get ahead and launder their points. Now, people might say, well, I helped them by going on Jubilee. That's a valid criticism. The problem is Jubilee exists. It has tens of millions of followers. The number of contact me watch from around the world saying they've watched this video is insane.
Yeah, you're breaking up right now. I just want to make sure people.
And therefore, I did think, look, Sam Cedar's done it.
You're breaking up. Yeah, you're saying the number of people who.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I
apologize for my vacation Wi-Fi.
Your Wi-Fi is a little bit funky, but
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Apologies for the vacation Wi-Fi. My point was that Jubilee has this huge reach, whether we like it or not. And I decided, well, let me go and try and put a progressive side and take down some of these people. And look, I hope some neutral people watching will say, all right, well, clearly these people are insane and we want nothing to do with them.
So it goes back to a point, the framing. Should we engage with fascists? Because I believe we are at a place where fascists represent one of the two major political parties. And not just one of the two major political parties, the entire right-wing ecosystem. Because, folks, the right-wing ecosystem, I believe, is larger than the GOP. You can see with the Epstein scandal. So right-wing media dominates. I think it's gone fascist. Donald Trump, you and I agree, is fascist. We've been saying it for a while. The Republican Party is fascist. And whatever comes out of the Republican Party is fascist. I believe Connor, the guy who was online, who then had the weird Tucker Carlson laugh. The guy who's openly fascist, pro-Franco, I think kind of pro-Nazi even, who got fired, but now is claiming that he's the victim and raising money from white supremacists and has become a hero. I believe he's the present and future of the Republican Party. And what I appreciated, and I think this is why it's a win in the long run, he gave out the plan, Mehdi. He gave the long-term plan. They're using democracy to install fascism. And that's what I appreciated about it, that they're open about it.
And I said that, if you watch the taping, I make that point very clear. The good thing about this entire setup is that you guys are just telling on yourselves and making very clear that you don't believe in anything other than power and taking control. And you're identifying yourself by clapping for the guy. No one recoiled in the room from what he was saying. And it was interesting that he's now complaining, I see online, that he was fired for his constitutionally protected free speech and beliefs. The guy doesn't believe in the Constitution. He made it very clear the Constitution is only for Republicans, only for him, only for fascists. He doesn't care about this stuff. Oh, he liked the Second Amendment, but he didn't seem to care about the First Amendment or other parts of the Constitution. So you're right. Look, there was a moment where I say to him, how would you pick your autocrat? And he says, well, I don't know. Maybe the people would choose. I was like, isn't that democracy? No, they'd choose and then just to get to the autocrat. So it reminds me of, the old slogan that people used to say about the Muslim Brotherhood, or, people say, oh, Muslims in the Middle East, they want one vote, one time. Remember that? There used to be a line about how Muslim extremism, and I was like, oh, well, this is not Muslims. This is Christian nationalists in America saying very clearly, we want one vote once for our guy, and then he's in charge forever. And that is a very dangerous road to go down. And people, look at the polling, look at the academic evidence. The Republican Party is super pro-authoritarian. They're super down on democracy. The party that used to claim to care about civil liberties and freedoms and, don't tread on me, they are down with dictatorship. They had no problem with Donald Trump saying, I'll be dictator for a day. They had no problem with people saying they're going to, Donald Trump saying he's going to run for a third term in violation of the 12th and 22nd Amendments. They love the strongman rule, right? They love calling him, you have members of Congress calling him daddy, right? Look, this is the world we live in right now. And the only thing about these guys in LA that I dealt with was they think Trump's too moderate. They want a Franco, a Mussolini who's much more nationalistic and much more fascistic than the former reality TV star.
And the one thing where we saw them agree with you, but even then they agreed in the most problematic ways, was Gaza. And the reason why they agree with you on Gaza is that they're flaming anti-Semites.
Yes. Yes,
And
it
so
was very blatantly anti-Semitism on display in that room, and it was very troubling to me as someone who is critical of Israel because I care about Palestinian human rights, not because I'm anti-Jewish. The far right in this country are becoming super anti-Semitic again. OG anti-Semitism is back. We keep talking about the new anti-Semitism, which apparently is Palestinian, pro-Palestinian college students holding up placards saying "Free Palestine." Meanwhile, the original anti-Semites, the white supremacists, the Nazis, the people who did the Holocaust, they're very much back in vogue on the right. They've been mainstreamed by the president. You have Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL obsessing over placards on campus and students saying stuff like, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That apparently is the big existential threat to American Jewish communities. And I'm saying to my American Jewish friends, cousins, colleagues, please focus on the real threat to you right now, which are the people in that room with me in LA, the people in the White House who are mainstreaming anti-Semitism. Let us not forget that the two worst terrorist attacks against Jews in this country, the worst, single worst in our lifetime, happened in Donald Trump's first term in Pittsburgh by a guy who was pushing great replacement theory, echoing Donald Trump's rhetoric. And, I look at Jonathan Greenblatt, who has nothing to say about Donald Trump calling bankers Shylocks, and meanwhile focuses only on pro-Palestine. And it's like, look over there, guys. There is a very real, very clear, very transparent, very violent threat from old school far-right anti-Semites who think the Jews control everything, who think the Jews are not Americans. And we're devoting very little of our time. Instead, the entire media is insisting that a Muslim guy running for mayor in New York should condemn a slogan he's never used. Meanwhile, these guys are like, we're going anti-Israel because we don't like the Jews. And by the way, I would say to my lefty friends and Muslim friends watching, these are not our allies. You can be pro-Palestine without allying with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. You can.
Yeah,
and MTG.
it's a very important point because you and me get sent these videos. Look at Tucker and look
Martin
at
Taylor
Candace.
Greene.
I'm like, see the rest of the video. See the next 5 minutes, right? And I think it's very important because when it comes to the replacement theory, which I'm glad you cited and mentioned, and when it comes to also QAnon, the base of it is always anti-Semitism. It's a cabal of Jews that are controlling everyone else and using brown and black people who are their mental inferiors to replace white people. And not a peep from Jonathan Greenblatt, not a peep from the hardcore pro-Israel Zionist groups, not a peep from all the people who give money to Donald Trump, and not a peep from, let's be honest, maybe corporate media, right? Because here's Zoran Mamdani, who has to, like you said, condemn a slogan he's never used. But we've given Elise Stefanik a pass for literally spending money promoting the replacement theory after Robert Bowers, a terrorist, went and killed 11 people, 11 Jews in the Tree of Life synagogue. The asymmetry, go back to this point, is so naked, so shameless, so disgusting, right? Because here we are, we have to apologize. Zoran Mamdani has to apologize for basically being a Muslim immigrant. He has to apologize for a slogan he's never said. AOC has to apologize for Medicare for all. Bernie Sanders has to explain that he's not like too left, right? Kamala Harris went all the way centrist to placate this both sides framing. And you have open supporters of fascism using Nazi conspiracy theories that have been promoted by Donald Trump. And so this is this reality. I believe, corporate media, when it comes to Colbert and others, to grease the wheels of the merger between Paramount and Skydance, I've said this for a couple of years. I think it's being proven true. Corporate America will lay out the red carpet for Trump and fascism. They think it's good for business. I believe, even though we're the majority, the point I'm trying to make, I'll give it to you, is I believe we are, if you will, outnumbered. Not necessarily by the numbers of the majority, but by power. It is an asymmetrical framing. And I give you your debate, the Jubilee debate, for example. Like, how do we then, the rest of us, the majority, engage in good faith with corporate media, institutions, power, and a Republican Party that does not play with good faith and on an equal playing ground?
It's the big existential question of our time, Waj. I've been asking it for many years now. How do we deal with this when we won't identify the problem? We won't say Voldemort's name. We won't say fascism. I remember going on MSNBC as a guest host prior to joining them full time in August of 2020. It was when they were snatching people off the streets of Portland, unmasked cars. It was a preview of what ICE is doing today on a mass scale. Unmarked cars, masked agents, no badges, grabbing people from the George Floyd protest. And I said, this is fascism. I think I was the first host on MSNBC to use the F word. And it was very controversial to say it at the time, very rare to hear that word said. And it took a lot of time now to finally get a lot of mainstream liberal, centrist, Democratic Party officials to say the F word. And that is part of the problem, right? You first have to identify the problem before you can fight back. And by the way, you mentioned corporate media and big business. There is no fascism without big business playing its role. That is what fascism is about. Fascism is about the fusion, the merger between nationalist parties and big business. That's what we saw in Mussolini's Italy. That is what we've seen throughout history. So, of course, big business is going to roll over and play handmaiden to the rise of fascism. But look, in terms of numbers, you're right about power and money. But in terms of sheer numbers, one thing that keeps me going and helps me get out of bed in the morning is there is more of us than there are of them. The Jubilee folks are not a majority of the right, let alone a majority of America. And we have to remember that. And that has to keep us going. The majority of Americans still don't agree with fascism. Look at the poll numbers. Donald Trump is the most unpopular president. Look at his poll numbers on immigration and on detention of migrants. Hugely unpopular, despite Republicans claiming it's an 80-20 issue. No, actually, the single most unpopular issue for Donald Trump in his first 100 days was kill Abrigo Garcia, sending this guy from Maryland illegally to El Salvador. So it's bullshit. And we should keep reminding them that there is more of us than there are of them. And one thing I would say, though, is that we must keep shaming them. I know it's very hard to shame the shameless, but we must shame the enablers. We must shame the people who are complicit in this stuff. Take one example of this. I debated a guy at Jubilee, an Iranian American, who defended the killing of Palestinian kids. It was insane.
I'm not laughing at the defense.
You're laughing at his visual appearance.
I call him the Iranian Hamburglar. Yes,
I call him a Batman villain. He was very strangely dressed and strange demeanor, but he was chillingly defending the killing of innocent Palestinian children. And you think, wow, that's a horrible thing to say. By the way, a lot of the white supremacists in the room didn't support him. Ironically, even they wouldn't go that far as the Iranian American Shah supporter. But what was interesting is you hear him say that. It airs this week, and then I see Randy Fine, Republican congressman from Florida, newly elected, saying exactly the same stuff. An elected member of Congress saying, let's starve them. Let them starve to death. Calling every Muslim, every Palestinian a terrorist, saying Gaza should be nuked. Guess what he just got this week? He got elevated to the House Foreign Affairs Committee, the same committee that Ilhan Omar was removed from for not saying anything violent or genocidal. Randy Fine, who is openly calling for genocide in Gaza, is elevated to the House Foreign Affairs Committee. By the way, the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee is Brian Mast, a guy who compared Palestinian children in Gaza to Nazi children who should be killed. That is the mainstream, as you said at the very start of the conversation.
And were the idea of idea of costing
America first, but you wear a foreign military uniform to Congress. That is, as you've said, the mainstream of the Republican Party, the elected Republican Party. And we have to keep pointing this out. And we have to keep shaming mainstream media when they treat these people as normal representatives of the right, because that is fundamentally where we are. The Overton window, sorry to use that horrible phrase, is moving day after day further and further to the right. And unfortunately, a lot of people on our side of the divide have helped move it along. And just a classic example of that is the current leadership of the Democratic Party in Congress. The fact that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have not endorsed Zohran Mamdani is a gift to fascists, racists, and white supremacists.
And they haven't censured Randy Fine, who's had a track record of Islamophobia.
Why have they not called for censure? Okay, they're not the majority, fine, but at least call for it.
Yeah, and then they threw Rashida Tlaib under the bus for far less. They threw Ilhan Omar under the bus for far less. They still haven't endorsed Zohran Mamdani, who's going to be the next mayor of New York. And they took a photo with war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes.
2 weeks ago.
Well, Cory Booker tried to hide, if we remember that.
His face. Yeah, it's like, where's Waldo?
You're too tall, Cory. You're too tall.
I have you for 2 more minutes because you have to go on Piers Morgan and discuss this. Bringing it back full circle.
More masochism.
Yeah, more masochistic. Should we engage with fascists? I think the first step, and I think you already mentioned it, it's very important. The rest of us have to acknowledge what we're dealing with. Eyes wide open. I think America is suffering from a failure of imagination. Oh, it can't happen here. It's happening, folks. I give you Donald Trump. We're dealing with fascists. You said it. I've been saying it. A few others have been saying this is a fascist movement. That's number one. You have to acknowledge it. Number two, then, the final question I have for you, Mehdi, is if indeed this fascist movement represents the entirety of the Republican Party and the conservative movement, which I believe it does, and right-wing media, the normies, the rest of us, how do we engage these people? Because I'm old enough to remember that in America we said, okay, the KKK can exist, they can assemble, they can talk, but most corporate media and most of us in institutions would say, we won't give you the platform. You can exist, but we won't give you a platform. Yeah. If the entirety of the right wing now is fascist, how do we not engage them? We have to.
I don't have a simple answer to that. It's really hard. After January 6th, I had a show on MSNBC and I said, I'm not having any election deniers on the show. I'm not having any Republican election deniers on the show. And then 2024 came along and you're like, oh, is election denier running for president? All the Republicans are now election deniers. What do you do? Otherwise, do you say, we're in a horrible two-party system in this country. I wish we didn't have a two-party system. We do. And one of the two parties is completely crazy and election deniers and climate deniers and fascist enablers or fascist adjacent, if not outright fascist. And then you have to say, well, you can't expect corporate media. I'm not so naive to say corporate media are not going to have have any Republicans on. Of course they are. The reality then becomes, are you going to challenge them? We need a much more challenging media climate. We need interviewers who are willing to ask tough questions, which we don't have in the US. It's a perennial complaint of mine for 10 years after living here. That needs to change. But also, look, people are going to criticize me and say, well, you platform these fascists. First of all, Jubilee picked the people. I didn't pick the people. Second of all, I didn't know they would be self-proclaimed fascists. Third of all, if you watch the video, I do say I don't debate with fascists. And Connor was then removed because I was like, I'm not debating fascists. Don't think we should debate or platform fascists, people especially self-identified as fascists, but I don't think you can avoid the fact that they exist in our society, and I think you need to be able to have debate and discussion and know the arguments well enough to win those debates and discussions, but the priority needs to be winning over those low-information voters. Most Americans don't follow politics. That is a fundamental truth. Most Americans don't care about politics, don't follow politics, don't watch politics, don't know who their elected representative is. They don't know what's going on. So for those of us who are political, kind of people on a Substat Live on a Wednesday in the middle of the day, we need to be telling our fellow Americans, our family members, our friends, telling them the truth about what's going on, waking them up, to use a phrase, getting them awokened as to what is going on in our country, because that is the fundamental problem right now. I meet very well-meaning, small c conservatives, not partisans, not Republican members, but conservative Americans. And they will say stuff like, well, you know, both sides have extremists, the far left, the far right. And we have to remind them that, no, the far left wants universal health care, the far right wants Nazism. And if anything came out of that Jubilee debate, I hope that's become very, very clear.
Yeah, I'm less optimistic knowing this country. I think they're going to both sides fascism, which was always my fear. And, a dark humor is that they're trying to reboot Indiana Jones. If they do, Indiana Jones is probably going to have a coffee with the Nazi and go beat up an immigrant. You and I grew up in the time where he actually punched Nazis, but now they're like, well, maybe the Nazis, there's some nice Nazis. Real quick, I'll end it with this. A few years ago, maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago, Francesca and I were being poached to do a left-right show for Rolling Stone. So we went to New York. We were like in the final 4 or final 5. It was me, another person representing, I don't know, the center left. Tim, what's the guy from Bulwark? Tim Miller?
Tim Miller?
Yeah, he was the right. And then the reason why they had such a hard time finding someone from the right, the producer told me, is our baseline was so low for the right wing. All we wanted was someone who was not a election denier and wasn't openly white nationalist.
Yeah. Covertly fine, but not openly.
Yeah, that's what they said. That was a threshold.
Can't find
it. It took them forever to find someone, and they couldn't find anyone, folks. And that was 3 or 4 years ago. And meanwhile, me saying like being pro DI and pro CRT was super leftist. That's the both sides framing. But I think to let Mehdi go and to wrap it up, folks, should we engage with fascists? It's a big question, because what happens when 30% of this country goes fascist, when the entire right-wing movement is fascist, and we have an entire corporate media structure and an entire institutional structure that is affirmative action for conservatives, and they do both sides. At the very least, you name them, you call them out, you mock them, and you show the bankruptcy of their ideas like Mehdi did. Mehdi, before you go to Piers Morgan, shamelessly promote yourself.
Please do support Zeteo, where we don't both sides fascism, where we expose fascism, where we've got a great stable of writers, producers, presenters, reporters. Zeteo.com, Zeteo.com, Zeteo on Substack, Zeteo on YouTube. Come support independent media like The Left Hook, like Zeteo, standing up to rising American fascism and calling what it is.
Thanks, Mehdi, for joining us. Thanks, everyone else. It's The Left Hook. No paywalls. Mehdi, you can jump off if you want. Folks, I'm going to have Ruth Ben-Ghiat on in about 32 minutes, 1 p.m. We're going to talk about how should we engage with and or defeat fascists. And then later on today, about 3 p.m., I'm going to have Danielle Moody, my co-host from Democracy-ish. We're going to talk about the politics of resistance in Star Wars. I got her to see Star Wars: A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Andor Season 2. The Left Hook has no paywalls. Everything is for free, because I believe democracy dies in darkness, folks. So if you have a few bucks, wonderful. I have like 800 kids. It'd be nice. I'm completely independent. If you don't have the money, I get it. At least become a free subscriber, and please share the content. I'll have this interview up. There's nearly 2,000 people watching us. It's about 30-minute conversation I had with Mehdi. He had to run to Piers Morgan. I'll have it up later today in about an hour or so. And for those who didn't see this viral video, it's Mehdi Hasan debating 20 far-right conservatives. I think the title should have been Mehdi Hasan debating 20 fascists. Jubilee is a studio based in LA which does these debates, and increasingly it's becoming like Squid Games. I am worried about the state of America, because these really aren't debates. It's like Squid Games plus gotcha plus viral moments. At the same time, though, when you have a skilled debater or people who are smart like Mehdi or Sam Cedar, or even when you have some smart liberal kids there, who, by the way, if you've never seen the Jordan Peterson versus 20 Atheists, just exquisite. These kids destroyed them. Um, it reveals where they are. And I will say, if you watch it, again, it's 20 versus 1, right? 20 far right extremists versus Mehdi Hasan. And he dismantled them over a period of hour and a half. And today, as of this week, as that video has gone viral, some of those right-wing fascists are now proclaiming themselves to be the victims. And folks, isn't that just like Donald Trump and MAGA? They demand civility, but they give cruelty. They want safe spaces for themselves, no safe spaces for anyone else, perpetual grievance. And even when they have power, somehow they're the victim. And I recommend watching it. And to be honest, I had to see it in chunks. I know Mehdi. Mehdi called me two weeks ago. As soon as he finished, he got out of the studio and he was like, "Man, that was like he was shooketh." Because he's like, I did not expect that, right? Like he came in expecting, all right, far right, conservatives. He did not expect Nazi and fascist lovers. And Mehdi is a guy who rarely gets rattled. So he got rattled by the sheer assault of bigotry and ugliness, but he kept his cool. But I recommend people watching it. I told Mehdi, man, I'm like, it came out on Sunday. I'm like, I can't watch all of this. Like, even me, I need to I need the medicine to go down. I did it in 20-minute chunks, and I see some other people are saying the same things. 20-minute chunks. I'm like, all right, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. So out over 3 or 4 days, and I told Mehdi, all right, now I'm done. Um, I recommend watching it because you see where they are. You see their mindset, you see their ideology, and you see it doesn't make sense, folks. They don't care about logic, they don't care about intellectual consistency. There are literally people there who are telling the audience, my parents are immigrants, but I'm a real American. And then Mehdi says, well, I'm an immigrant and I'm a real American. No, not you. You're a fake American. He goes, wait, you just said you're the child of immigrants. Yeah, but they're real Americans. It doesn't matter. All that matters is they want power by any violent means necessary. That is, I think, the big takeaway. They're pro-Nazi, they're pro-fascist, they're pro-Franco, and the really sad part is Jubilee. The name is Jubilee. It's on YouTube. They host these wannabe like conservative YouTube stars. Francesca says she knows a lot of these folks because she's in LA, and she says these are like 20-something young wannabe influencers who Jubilee keeps casting, who are very much online and want to become online influencers. And the interesting thing is, what I was about to say is some of these folks are people of color. Some of these people are gay folks of color. And, I was having a conversation with Francesca about this. What they forget is they can be gay and a Latino. They can be an Iranian immigrant in LA because LA is diverse. Imagine if they were actually, I don't know, in some other places in America, right? So they are allowed to be POC fascists because they are in LA. And I think it's important to say, like, this is not based out of Texas. It's LA. And all of them at the end of the day want to be, famous because the color that trumps all other colors in America is the color green. Lisa, you said self-hatred. Yeah. There are three people in that of the 20 of the Jubilee. Two of the people who weren't that gross. I mean, the bar is pretty low, folks. Was this one kid who said he's a DACA kid, uh, who, was voted out the quickest because he ended up saying, I agree with your points, Mehdi, and they never came back. And you're like, bro, you're a DACA kid. What? The second one was another Iranian American. For those who don't know, Los Angeles has a very large Iranian American population. And he was somewhat reasonable. Like you could disagree with him, but he actually had like a reasonable debate/conversation with Mehdi. The third guy I call the Iranian Hamburglar. Trust me, when you see him, you'll understand why. And the Hamburglar was just like, talk about one of the most pathetic, self-hating, model minority enforcers of white supremacy. And I mean, and folks, let's be honest about it. We all have them in our communities. People who, all boils down to the following. I was having a conversation with some of my friends yesterday. I'm the good immigrant. I came here the right way. Why can't they work like I worked? Why can't they succeed like I succeeded? I'm like, mother effer, because you got lucky, you have a rich daddy, and you came here with education. That's why. If they had, opportunities like you did, if they were wealthy, and if they got lucky like you, yeah, they'd succeed. But you could tell, right? It's getting close to whiteness, right? They realize I won't be white, but if I can be close to whiteness, then I'll be one of the good ones. If I can live within the gated communities, then I'll be safe. I'm the good one. I'm the model minority. And as such, my ticket to the gated community is I have to turn around and be an enforcer for white supremacy. I have to be the good Asian who goes to Yale without affirmative action. I have to be the good Latino who came here legally. I have to be the good Muslim, right? Who condemns chants and slogans I've never used. And then they will like me. Chet will like me. And Chet loves me because Chet invites me to golf. I'm the good one and I'll be safe. And when they come after all the bad ones, they won't come after me because I know Chet. Me and Chet golf and I drink whiskey with him. And, we do barbecues. I'll be okay. And folks, what we've been saying for a year is that when fascists come in power, they come for everyone. They're coming for citizens. They're coming for legal immigrants. They're coming for kids. They're coming for fellow Republicans. Fascists are coming for everyone. It's America. They never learn. We never learn. Will people learn? I don't know. You had thanks all for chilling. Usually I just end it after the interview, but I'm in a mood, so I'm going to speak for a couple more minutes. And if anyone has any questions, go ahead and ask. And then at 1 o'clock, I'm going to end this in a bit. And at 1 o'clock, join us back. We have Ruth Ben-Ghiat. Ruth Ben-Ghiat is a fantastic scholar on fascism, wrote a great book about strongmen. And I have her on for about half an hour talking about this moment where I believe, I've been saying it, Mehdi's been saying it, Ruth's been saying it, a few others have been saying it. This is a fascist regime. This is authoritarianism. And folks, a poll came out today. Donald Trump is negative 11. This is the lowest he's been. He's gone down double digits. He's negative 5 on his strongest suit, immigration, negative 5. He is negative 35 on the Epstein scandal. He's negative double digits on the economy, on tariffs. Folks, he's getting desperate. He's going down. It's going to be bad. And like I've said with Danielle on Democracy-ish, is he reminds me of a desperate, violent rat that's backed into a corner. And knowing Donald Trump, he's the type of rat that will cut through anything and everyone, including his family. He'll cut the wires that'll burn down the house. He'll cut his own paw off if it meant that he and only he will survive. He doesn't care about anything or anyone, including his own base. And if you think I'm wrong about that, just a couple of days ago, the base that has hung on to the Epstein scandal, the QAnon conspiracy, which is rooted in anti-Semitism and racism, and also calls the rest of us murderous pedophiles, the friggin' QAnon conspiracy that he promoted, right, to get in power. And folks, if I may, for those who don't know, the reason why Epstein's such a big deal is for the last 10 years, the right-wing ecosystem has promoted the QAnon conspiracy, which, by the way, folks, radicalized Vance Bolter. Oh, you remember Vance Bolter? Yeah, we don't talk about him because he's a white Christian man who was radicalized by QAnon, a Trump supporter who had a hit list of 70 Democrats, ended up shooting 4 of them, killing a Minnesota State Representative, Melissa Hortman, and her husband. He was radicalized by QAnon. So was Ashley Babbitt. It didn't matter. They still kept promoting it because at the end of the day, QAnon was promoted because they said the rest of us, anyone who doesn't support Trump, is part and parcel of this conspiracy led by the Jews to kidnap and kill and abuse children. They think of us as pedophile murderers. And they said that Donald Trump is the only one who can eliminate the deep state. That's how critical QAnon is to understanding the mindset of MAGA and why he is negative 35 on Epstein and why Epstein might be his kryptonite. So Donald Trump gets into office. He was supposed to eliminate the deep state and reveal it. How reveal it? Through Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein was the missing link. And through the Epstein files, it would all be proven true. But guess who is all over the Epstein files? Donald Trump. And this is why he is desperate. Watch my interview with Lev Parnas yesterday, where we talk about how he's now sending Todd Blanche to talk to Ghislaine Maxwell. He's getting more and more desperate, and as a fascist gets more and more desperate, a fascist gets more and more violent. And so that is my fear, folks. That is my fear. And also, as this is happening, going back to the Jubilee conversation I just had with Mehdi, thanks for the 2,000 people who are watching. This country, after 10 years, Donald Trump has been in power for 10 years, not 1 year, not 2 years, 10 years. This country refuses to acknowledge what we are witnessing. Language matters. They refuse to use the word white supremacist. They refuse to use the word racist. They refuse to use the word fascist. They refuse to collect the receipts. They do both sides. And if I may expound on both sides, because Mehdi and I have been in this game for a long time. I was at CNN for a year, contributing op-ed writer for New York Times, co-host of Al Jazeera America. Mehdi was at Al Jazeera. He was then at MSNBC. There is a reptilian, ossified mindset of those in institutions where they feel, Kathy, Mehdi was here for 30 minutes and he left. I'll have the entire conversation on in about 20 minutes. I was just doing my post-Mehdi rant. I just wanted to get some things off my chest. So if you came from Mehdi, I'm sorry, but Mehdi was here from 12 to 12:30. But I'll have it up in about an hour, okay? So let me just tell you how it works. I want to tell you how the sausage is made, all right? So I was telling people this example of a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, there was a call for this left-right debate show that Rolling Stones was gonna, if you will, kind of oversee. And they were pitching it for TV. I made the final cut. I did pretty well. Francesca was one of the people who almost made the final cut as well. They invited like 4 or 8 of us back and forth to New York. Tim Miller from Bulwark was one of the folks that they really liked. There was another presenter from CNN. So we get there. And the producer says to me, and I shared this with Mehdi, we're having a tough time finding the 2 Republicans to debate you, the 2 conservatives. And they said, yeah, the bar has gone so low now that we simply need someone who's good on TV, but is not a supporter of the January 6th violent insurrection, will actually agree that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, and wait for it, is not openly white nationalist. Now, I want you to just sit with this for a second. For the right wing, you move the Overton window all the way to the right. You lower the bar to the point where someone can slither under it. All they have to do is not be openly white nationalist and admit that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. Now, I'm not a Hopkins grad, Susan. I went to UC Berkeley, but I got invited to speak there. And every time I go speak at a university, I love the fact they give me free shirts and free mugs. I'm a child of immigrants. So as I was saying, imagine now, folks, for the rest of us, if you aren't right wing, if you're watching, I'm assuming, suppose you're just, I don't know, non-MAGA. What's the standard for us? You know, what's the standard for me? Can I even say Medicare for all? Can I say abolish ICE? Can I say defund the police? Can I say pro-Palestine? I'll give you an example. Look at Zohran Mamdani. Zohran Mamdani, and even Barack Obama, people of color with trisyllabic names, with origins, to Africa. And Barack Obama was actually born here. Zohran Mamdani was actually born in Uganda. They have to be near perfect. They have to be near perfect. Obama had to show his birth certificate. How embarrassing. A black man had to show his birth certificate because Donald Trump was the one who promoted the birther conspiracy. Look at Zohran Mamdani. Zohran Mamdani smiles, never gets flustered, never loses his cool, has to deal with the most Islamophobic, racist bullshit, right? They equate him to the 9/11 terror attacks. Why? Because he's Muslim. They call him Hamas. You've seen Randy Fine go after him. You've seen Charlie Kirk go after him. You've seen the New York Post go after him. And Democrats, fellow Democrats, the week where Republicans were voting on the big, beautiful bill from hell, instead of using their weekend channels to inform Americans about what's in this disastrous bill that adds $3 trillion to the deficit, that adds $180 billion to ICE, that creates more detention centers and guts Medicaid. Do you know what Gillibrand, Hakeem Jeffries, and others did? They took to the Sunday news shows to condemn Zoran Mamdani for saying a chant he never said and said, I need him to condemn globalize the Intifada. A chant he has never used, folks. And that is the danger of the both sides framing. I'm telling you, as a person who worked at CNN, as a person who worked at corporate media, the producers, the old school producers, it's fascinating. It's like watching, it's trying to teach like an old dog new tricks. They just can't. They can't. They're not agile. They're like it's like you ever see Terminator 2, Terminator 2. There's liquid metal T-1000. Robert Patrick, and then there's the Arnold Schwarzenegger, the hunky kind of slow one with metal, and Terminator is like cannot compute. It's like RoboCop when he gets like shot on the head, he goes brain malfunctioning. They cannot evolve. For them, no matter what they do, both sides, and it is affirmative action for conservatives. If you don't believe me, I give you this guy who I used to debate on CNN, Scott Jennings. Scott Jennings is allowed to literally derail a nightly Abby Phillips panel. Abby Phillips is a smart lady. She brings on smart panelists. Who derails that panel with bullshit? Scott Jennings. Why? Because boo hoo hoo, what about the right wing and the conservatives? Scott Jennings knows his role. He sits there smiling. He knows nothing will affect him. He's the new Rick Santorum. Before that was Jeffrey Lord. Scott Jennings got a raise. And speaking about the double standards, when I was at CNN for a year, I got 4 warnings. Those 4 warnings came because my right-wing CNN colleagues that I used to debate on panels complained. They whined to management about me that I was too harsh or I should be nicer to them. And so, look what happens to corporate media. Look what happens to Disney Studios. They always bend the knee. Bad faith, right-wing grievance, bad faith, right-wing, assault on Little Mermaid, on one transgender character, on Toni Morrison being taught in schools, right? On sexy M&Ms, right? Colin Kaepernick, boo-hoo-hoo, victimhood. And if you see this Jubilee interview with Mehdi Hasan, these 20 fascists, it was 20 fascists versus Mehdi. I want to, I don't want to even promote the right wing YouTube channel that he was on, but one of them, Connor, who got outed and got fired from his job for being pro-fascist, pro-Franco. Now he's saying, I'm the victim. All of them are saying, I'm the victim. Oh, Mehdi Hasan did gish galloping. It was 20 versus Mehdi. They're perpetual victims, perpetual grievance. It goes back to, folks, and I know some people might not like hearing this, white grievance, white rage, the Civil War, right? The history of the Civil War, the romanticized history, the lost cause. It's the same old story, right? It's Jim Crow on reboot. The Hunter Biden 3-hour interview, because it was kind of wild, but he cooked for a second, and him saying it's Jim Crow on reboot, it was a good line. It's Jim Crow on reboot. That's right, Natasha. White man's burden, insecurity, fear, grievance. If you've been in power your whole life, equality looks like what? Oppression, right? So we are the victims. It is us. Oh no, we enslaved black people, but it was our right. And look at the North, and they took away our culture and our heritage, and boo-hoo-hoo, endless grievance. We are the victims. Oh no, segregation, everything was fine, and then they made the black kids go into the school. Oh, boo-hoo. It is us, the white man, who is the one who's being oppressed. I'm not making this up, folks. Look at the polls. Our Trump supporters believe that the white man is the most oppressed person in America because, another poll came out that white men in America, in corporate America, feel like they're oppressed because they can't say what's really on their mind. And I'm like, what do you really want to say? Like, what is it that you want to get off your chest, folks? Folks, it isn't all white people. Some of my best friends are white people. I love the whites. The moderate whites are my favorite whites. I hope you all know. We're talking about white supremacy, and we're talking about the racism that drives a large part of the MAGA base. It is white supremacy and whiteness, folks. And yes, as we've seen, white supremacy, and we talked about it with Mehdi and after Mehdi, that white supremacy is also very, very attractive to people of color. It's always been this way. Model minority, right? The good ones who then become enforcers of white supremacy. So I kept you all longer than I wanted to. Thanks all for tuning in. In about 10 minutes, come back. I'm going to have Ruth Ben-Ghiat and Ruth Ben-Ghiat is a scholar on fascism and authoritarianism. And we're going to talk about how Trump, every couple of months I talk to Ruth about kind of where we are on the fascism index. And now we see the the full-throated attack on the press, on Stephen Colbert, on Donald Trump just destroying the EPA, on Donald Trump destroying the Department of Education, on the Supreme Court, essentially through the shadow docket, rubber stamping whatever he wants to rubber stack with. Marine, can you send the link of your talk with Mehdi? Yes. It will be up in about 15 minutes. I'm going to have the entire conversation with Mehdi. It was from 12 to 12:30 p.m. He had to run for Piers Morgan today. I was supposed to be on Piers Morgan, but Ozzy Osbourne died and the reshuffle. So Mehdi is a masochist. He's on 12:30 talking about his Jubilee debate. I'm sure Piers Morgan will do a both sides on that. It'll be fun. So the entire conversation with Mehdi was about 30 minutes. And we talked about a big dilemma, folks, is should we engage with fascists? And really, fascist now is synonymous with the Republican Party. I know people might not like hearing it, but this is where we are. And how do you live in a country where one of the two major political parties is pro-fascist and has an ecosystem, a right-wing political cultural ecosystem that has sway over 30% of the population and has sway over a lot of good people, a lot of neighbors, family members. I'm sure you all know, sadly, I know people who voted for Trump. Not everyone has horns on their head. Not everyone's full fascist, but they're like, oh, both sides. But oh, the left is too much. You know how it goes. We have friends and family members because right-wing media is now the dominant media force in America. So it seeps through, folks. It even gets the normies now. The normies are getting radicalized. Yes, the Dems are complicit. So this is the big question. How do you defeat these fascists? Do you engage with them? Do you ignore them? Do you give them oxygen? Do you go on like Mehdi did and debate them and humiliate them? And to be fair to Mehdi, and I know Mehdi, and Mehdi, called me after he did this debate. He had no idea that's what he was walking into. Jubilee, and I don't think he can say this because he probably signed some NDA with Jubilee, but Jubilee effed him over. Having been in this game a long time, one or two fascists slip through, happens. Folks, that wasn't one or two. It seemed like they deliberately set Mehdi up with the worst of the worst to get the viral moments, and they got what they wanted. Mehdi was trending, that video was trending, that was viral. But at what cost? I don't know. Mehdi right now is on the fence about it too. Did it do more harm? Did it do more good? I think in the long run, I think it could do good because Mehdi is one of the very few skilled debaters who could take all of them on, brings the receipts. He wasn't flustered. He's a professional debater. He was able to reveal them, but they also got platformed. But it's up to the rest of us now to say, this is who they are. This is not the outlier of the Republican Party. White supremacy, white nationalism, Nazi conspiracy theories, the replacement theory, anti-immigrant sentiment is part and parcel of the modern Republican movement. This is who they are. And we have to acknowledge it. We have to name it. And I'll end on this is people who keep saying to me, can't happen here. Can't happen in America. The guardrails will hold. I give you Donald Trump. I give you January 6th. I give you him pardoning the violent insurrectionists. I do a little violin for the EPA. I do a violin for Veterans Affairs. I do a violin for due process. I do a violin for those days when we used to be against masked armed agents kidnapping people off the street. It's going to get worse, folks, but we have the numbers. We have the numbers. So come back in 7 minutes. I'm going to have Ruth on here, and we're going to talk about where we are in this moment of fascism and how we can take them on. And give me like an hour, folks. And for those who came a bit late for the Mehdi conversation, we're going to have it all in full with the transcript. This has been The Left Hook. No paywalls. I keep everything for free. If you have a few bucks, please become a paid subscriber. It helps. That's how I'm able to keep the lights on and feed my kids. Be kind, be decent, and please, oh, please don't be a fascist. I'll see you in 7 minutes.